Hello, book friends, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new, I am Literaturely Lou, and we talk about fantasy and sci-fi books here. Today's episode is going to be a big one. I meant to film this earlier in the month, but then I got tickets to a very exciting book event, and I wanted to share clips of that event in this video, which is why I'm just getting it out now. So we're going to do a reading wrap-up of the books that I read in July and August. If you simply want to know the books that will be in this video and watch the reviews specific to them, I will have a list of those books and their reviews below this video. So let's get into it. Before we get started, I'd like to apologize for the lighting that you'll see in this video. I film in front of my window and the sun comes in and out. So starting with The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson, we have a world divided by houses, each recognized for their special skill set. The Ox House is known for their strength and practicality. The Monkey House is known for creativity. The Hound's strength is their focus and dedication, and each skill plays a vital role in the governing of a room. The story begins with a family that has been taken captive from the throes of a war. We understand that due to some agreement, they've been given sanctuary that only goes so far because of who this family is. So you feel that tension when they are brought before the emperor, and we get a very challenging scene that sets the whole story in motion. From the crux of the issue at hand, we meet one of our protagonists, Nima Craw. She is from the Raven House. Known for their knowledge and organization, they usually fill the roles of teachers, lawyers, scholars, bureaucrats, these sorts of positions. Early in the story, Nima is forced to make a very difficult decision, and as a result of this, she becomes a pariah among the community. However, Nima is not the only one that has the past looming over her. Another character, Ruko, is just as affected, if not more. First, for the role that he plays in our early conflict, but then when we see him again in the aftermath, his apathy towards the situation frames him as our antagonist. He is from the Tiger House, known for their pride and control, and these members usually fill positions of leadership in government. So building from that foundation, we have an emperor who is at the end of his reign, and he is needing to find someone to supersede him. So qualifiers from every house are preparing to enter into a set of games to compete for the honor. When a contender is murdered, our protagonist Nima enters in her place to investigate the other competitors who she suspects could be responsible. One contender in particular, but it could be any of them. But as I mentioned before, she is not a fan favorite, so just as much attention is on her as there is on the other opponent. This novel has a wide range of characters with personalities all very distinct from one another, so the portions of dialogue feel like you're in a real conversation. Nima's idiosyncrasies rear themselves at awkward and at times inopportune moments that take you by surprise. There might be some neurodivergency here, and it's in addition to the representation found in this book. This was a 6-star read for me. Morally ambiguous characters, really cool folk tales weave throughout, joviality from the moments of sarcasm and clumsiness, not to mention a phenomenal audio. I am impatient for book 2. Next, a book pretty popular in the book space, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first book in a new series of his where a group of characters are being brought together to escort a woman to Troy, where she is expected, although she doesn't know it, to be the nominal head of the city. If you like stories that feel chaotic in a fun way, slapstick humor, cartoonish violence, raunchy, then this is definitely the book for you. We have a priest, a werewolf, an elf that turns invisible, a vampire, a pirate, and a magician. He's a magician, and that's very important. This motley crew is far from being a band at the start of the book. There's so much judgment towards each individual character's lifestyle, and I loved how all these personalities clashed together. I was also a little nervous that I was going to tune out on this plot because the traveling through the land stories don't usually hold me. Some examples of this are The Black Tongue Thief and The Daughter's War, at least 1 or 2 books in the Throne of Glass series. When the traveling across the land is the primary focus of the plot, I find that the story does not hold my attention. Because essentially, it's a book of fleeting moments, right? The characters will pass through a town, maybe there's a bar scene or a sex scene or it's just some awkward interaction. They struggle to make it out, and that's the tension, but when they do, the whole thing is in the rearview mirror. So there's no chance to attach yourself to any of it. And I just tend to not latch to them and then in turn not latch to the story. But this book is not like that. We get a lot of time with the characters as they travel along, so I was hooked. Also, I really enjoyed the sort of short, snappy, quick rhythm of writing in this book. So next we have Womb City by Tolo Samase, an Afro-futuristic sci-fi thriller. Our MC in this book really wants to start a family, and she's in the process of doing just that. She has a baby being gestated in a womb incubator. The process is very costly, not just financially, which is not a big issue for our main character. seeing as she's an entrepreneur and comes from a very prestigious family. But also, if she commits any crime, her daughter will become the property of the facility where she is being gestated, and it is clear that terrible, terrible things can ensue from this. Nella, our protagonist, is also a chipped person who has body hopped a few times, so she is heavily monitored by her husband, who is also a police officer. This book, in my opinion, had way too many moving parts. I think quite a few themes could have been removed from this book, and it would have made it easier to grasp. The aha moments felt contradictory and forced. Like I wouldn't see this happening because why would it happen? Because it wouldn't happen. Some things felt implausible. Also, the dialogue threw me at times. One character would say something, and the response that would come from it did not feel like something a person would say. And maybe that's just me. If there are people that do communicate like this, then I think the book will make a lot more sense to them. But since we're avoiding spoilers, I think that the message of the book was all over the place. The plot twists felt so forced, and you can tell they were put there just to push the story along. It didn't make sense for the characters as you were made to understand them. It didn't make sense for the book. There were pretty heavy topics in the book that should have had an impact on me, but they didn't. And I think part of that was because of the delivery and just the chaotic feel of the book. So unfortunately, Womb City was not for me. Finally, the review that I'm most excited about, Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I was very surprised that so many people were taken off guard by the philosophy and the theology that is used to set up the story of this book. There were creators that were recommending books like Dante's Inferno and the Odyssey as prep read for Katabasis. But apparently it was mismarketed as a romantasy, and that doesn't surprise me because there is a romance subplot, and these days, if there's even a whiff of romance in a book, it gets tagged as a romantasy. Yeah. However, the romance in this book is a tertiary focus. If this is your first time with an R.F. Kuang book, then you may be thrown off by how she tells a story, but I can assure you that Katabasis has her imprint all over it. If I read this book and did not know who the author was, I would say this book reads like an R.F. Kuang book. She likes to work from this template where it almost feels like you're reading two different stories. I have now read Yellowface and the Poppy War in addition to Katabasis, and in each book, the first half seems to deluge the main protagonist's perspective. We get a very clear picture of where a main character is kicking off from. In Yellowface, June's whole focus was to be recognized as an author, and she pit herself against her friend slash nemesis. In the Poppy War, Rin from the start is aspiring for greatness, and she sees herself as more than a girl from a town that doesn't really accept her, destined to marry and breed. And about halfway through the Yellowface and the first installment of the Poppy War, the story shifts into a whole other extreme. Katabasis is very much the same. It is the peak of arcane academia that is trending right now. Our two protagonists are students of magic at Cambridge. They are under the tutelage of a narcissistic and manipulative professor who is murdered and sent to hell. Our two main characters then make it their mission to get him back, and on their journey deeper into the belly of the underworld, they are confronted with layers of what seems to be their personal hells. Our characters are forced to face themselves, their internal conflicts, their identities, how these things impact the way they navigate the world around them, among other things. So again, the book is about far more than the romance, which seems so minor in the grand scheme. However, expanding on that further, I did rank this book higher than her other books because of the romance. I don't usually need romance to push a story along, but because her other stories are so heavy on dread and anxiousness, it lacks that balance from having that human connection and vulnerability. Katabasis balances those scales. On September 12th, I bought tickets to see R.F. Kuang in Seattle, and it was every bit as good as I expected it to be. Everyone in attendance received a signed copy of Katabasis, like I didn't already have many copies of Katabasis. I was not complaining. I found her interview to be very inspirational. As someone who's also trying to write a book herself, there was a lot of insight I could take away from watching her speak. I went to this solo, and I'm so grateful that I did. I reserved an Airbnb because the event was scheduled to end pretty late, and I had no desire to drive 3 hours back to Portland. I used this quiet time, however, to work a little on my own book, catch up on some reading, just think more on what I want these next few months to look like. If her book tour is coming to your city or a city near you, I would highly recommend paying for the ticket and seeing her speak. Also, my broken binding edition of Katabasis came in the mail, so a second please while I show it off. Next, we have The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is an epic fantasy set to be a trilogy with only the first 2 installments available now. I only read book 1, which invites us into a world of an unending war between the Omehi people and the Hedeni. This war is the framework for our conflict when we meet our main character, Tao, who is an Omehi lesser. This is a dual caste society stratified by lessers and nobles, determined by the bloodline of the mother, not the father, like we're more used to. And it's a rigid hierarchy that centralizes the conflict for our first book. When Tao loses someone at the hands of a noble, he becomes riddled with unrelenting rage that persuades him to become a swordsman in the war as a roundabout way to attain his true desire of eliminating those responsible for his loss. Tao's journey is gut wrenching. He taps into a very powerful magic that everyone assumed was only reserved for the gifted, which are always women. Not all women, but they're always women. Anyway, he kind of abuses it, and for that, there are consequences. But this book has everything, including dragons and dragon riders, which I felt like we didn't get enough of them, and I'm hoping that in the next few books, we do. It also leaves off on a pretty tough cliffhanger, so be prepared to have your heart ripped out. Oh, okay. The Library at Mount Char. Okay. The Library at Mount Char. Some would probably consider this a strange or weird fantasy. I called it a cosmic thriller. I think that's the best way to describe it. 12 orphans are under the care of an entity known as Father, and one day when Father goes radio silent, one orphan in particular, Caroline, enlists the help of her siblings and an outlier named Steve to retrieve him from a labyrinthine library they suspect he's trapped in. Insert random thought here. When I was writing the review for this book, the soundbite do 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 Steve, that was just in my head. In my head. But the awkwardness of Steve being amongst the group was so befitting for a book that has a tormentor and a tutu who's in love with a corpse. Yeah. This book holds a very ominous and bleak tone throughout, very jarring scenes that play with your tolerance and your intestinal fortitude. I refer to this book as roadkill in another review, and I stand by that. It is hard to look away. It packs a punch and gets you in the gut. My only con with this book was that some things felt left unfinished by the end of the book, and a character whose arc was pretty cemented throughout the entirety of the book was given a benevolent memory at the end, and I didn't really like that. But it didn't take away too much from the experience that I had, and I would still recommend this book to lovers of fantasy and thrillers. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. A microorganism is eating the energy from the sun, threatening the survival of mankind, and our best chance against it is a middle school teacher named Rylan Grace. That's it. That's all you need to know to pick up this book today. No? You still need more convincing? I don't think the intention behind this book was to have some metaphorical awakening, nor was it to peel back the layers of the human psyche. This book was only meant to be superficial entertainment, and it is a good book. Andy Weir had a lot of fun writing this book, and you could tell. The only seriousness to be found is the science. It is a science heavy book. But don't be discouraged by that. The author really streamlines everything to be understood by people who don't really study astrophysics, or at least I was convinced. If any of you know the study better and would like to counter that, then I welcome you. But more on the synopsis. Our protagonist wakes up on a ship having forgotten his name, why he's there, and what he's supposed to be doing. His crewmates have not survived the trip, and he is alone. The story then jumps back and forth between the past and the present as his memory returns incrementally. It starts with small details like his name and vocation, and then builds to bigger things when he remembers that back on Earth, there is a microorganism referred to as astrophage that has been eating the sun's energy and cooling our planet at a terrifying rate. His mission then becomes to find out more about the microorganism itself and to discover ways to combat it. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that he meets an extraterrestrial being who's been given the same mission, and the two put their heads together to find a solution. This book has a playful balance between tension and lightheartedness. There's sarcasm and giving in between these high pressure scenes that makes me think about a person who's trying to make you laugh after you've broken your leg. Like, it's not the right time, but it's also the perfect time. If you guys are not already aware, there's supposed to be a movie adaptation coming out next year. And if you've already read the book and know what kind of species Rocky is, I cannot wait to see that on the big screen. I feel like some people are going to laugh and some people are going to be very creeped out. One thing I will not be doing, however, is I will not be pitting the book against the movie. They are two different medias, and I want to enjoy them as two separate medias. So the book was fantastic. I do not expect the movie to be as good as the book, but I still expect the movie to be good, if that makes sense. Anyway, that is it. If you've made it this far, thank you guys so much for staying with me. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Happy reading.